Hello everybody, this is Refresh, and I am here to bring you a battle between the 5 Ikoria commander decks. We have Ruthless Regiment over here, Enhanced Evolution over there, Timeless Wisdom over there, Symbiotic Swarm over there, and Arcane Maelstrom over there. We will be playing using the Star variant, and so each commander deck wants to take out its 2 farthest commander decks. So in this case, Ruthless Regiment would want to take out Timeless Wisdom and Symbiotic Swarm. Those are considered opponents. The 2 neighboring commander decks are considered allies, and that is how we're going to try to speed up this 5-player game just a little bit. To determine start player, we'll all roll a 20-sided die each. Regiment rolls an 8. Evolution rolls a 7. Wisdom rolls a 13. Swarm rolls an 8. Maelstrom rolls a 2. Wisdom will go first. They'll draw their opening hand. Wisdom gets an Abandoned Sarcophagus, Commander Sphere, Skycloud Expanse, Temple of the False God, Cryptic Trilobite, Isperia Supreme Judge, and Spirit Karn. I don't think we can keep this hand because we don't have a good way to activate the Skycloud Expanse. The Temple of the False God doesn't really get anywhere until you have 5 or more lands, and so we'd be wanting to get at least 2 more lands before we can even get the Commander Sphere going. So we're going to mulligan this, and because this is multiplayer, we'll get 1 free mulligan. Now we have a Valiant Rescuer, a Plains, a Shiny Impetus, a Brailian Skyshark Rider, Akeem the Soaring Wind, Vizier of Tumbling Sands, and the Plains. I don't like this hand because we could only cast the Valiant Rescuer, and we don't have any cycling cards except for the Valiant Rescuer itself. And so I think we're going to have to mulligan down to 6. Now we have a Dismantling Wave, Reliquary Tower, Smoldering Crater, Ash Barrens, Ominous Seas, Psychic Impetus, and Island. I think this is a fine first hand. I think we're going to take the Dismantling Wave and stick this on the bottom because we don't have any white mana to cast it with. Swarm draws an Unbreakable Bond, Sandstep Citadel, Selesnya Sanctuary, Acidic Slime, Arcane Signet, Swamp, and Harmonize. I think this has everything that we need, and so we will keep this opening hand. Maelstrom draws a Niblis of Frost, Whiplash Trap, Mountain, Primal Empathy, Evolution Charm, Ravenous Gigotherium, and Forest. We have 0 blue mana and no way of getting it, which means that we can only cast 2 cards here. But because we can cast the Evolution Charm to get our blue mana, I think we're going to keep this one. Regiment draws a Plains, a Bonder's Ornament, Audric Master Tactician, Titan of Eternal Fire, Arcane Signet, Vigilante Justice, and Plains. I wouldn't normally like this hand, but because we have the Signet and 2 Plains, we can get to the Bonder's Ornament that will probably fix our mana to cast whatever that we need, and so it's a bit of a slow start, but I think we're going to keep it. Evolution draws a Forest, a Hungering Hydra, Souvenir Snatcher, Vastwood Hydra, Trumpeting Gnar, Fertilid, and Jungle Hollow. We only have 2 lands, but I think because we have the Fertilid, which can help us get the rest of the colors that we need to cast more things, we're going to keep this hand as well. Because this is multiplayer, we'll draw on the first turn. Wisdom draws a New Perspectives. We will play the Smoldering Crater. It's a land. It says it enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it for red and cycle it for 2. It'll enter the battlefield tapped, and then Wisdom will pass the turn. Swarm will draw. They get Audric Lunarch Marshal. We'll play the Sandstep Citadel. This is a land. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it for white, black, or green, and then Swarm will pass the turn. Maelstrom draws a Murmuring Mystic. They will play a Forest, and then Maelstrom will pass the turn. Regiment draws, gets a Thalia's Lieutenant. They will play a Plains, and then Regiment will pass the turn. Evolution draws, gets a swamp. They'll play the Jungle Hollow. This is a land it enters the battlefield tap. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. You can tap for black or red. And then Evolution will pass the turn. Wisdom untaps, draws, gets a spell Pyre Phoenix. Wisdom will play the island next. And then Wisdom will tap the island and the Smoldering Crater and cast Ominous Seas. This is an enchantment. Whenever you draw a card, put a foreshadow counter on Ominous Seas. Remove 8 foreshadow counters from Ominous Seas to create an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token. You can cycle it for 2, but we'll go ahead and use that. And then Wisdom will pass the turn. Swarm untaps, draws a Cairn Wanderer. We will play a Swamp. We'll tap the Sandstep Citadel and the Swamp to play an Arcane Signet. This is an artifact you can tap to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. And then Swarm will pass the turn. Maelstrom draws, gets a Wart the Raid Mother. Maelstrom will play a mountain, and then Maelstrom will hold up their mana for the next turn. Regiment draws an Adriana, Captain of the Guard. They will then play a Plains. They'll tap both of the Plains to cast an Arcane Signet, and then Regiment will pass the turn. Evolution untaps. They draw, they get a Nissa, Steward of Elements. They will play their Forest, and they'll tap the Jungle Hollow and the Forest for green to play a Fertilid. This is a 0/0 elemental that enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. For 1 and a green, you can remove +1/+1 counters from Fertilid, and target player searches their library for a basic land card, puts it onto the battlefield tap, and then shuffles their library. We'll go ahead and start with 2 counters on the Fertilid, and then Enhanced Evolution will pass the turn. Wisdom untaps, draws, they get a Boros Garrison, and when they get this, they'll put a counter on the Ominous Seas. Then, because they don't have a whole lot to do, they will play the Boros Garrison. It is a land, enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, return a land you control to its owner's hand. You can tap it for red and white. We'll return the island to our hand. And then Wisdom will pass the turn. Swarm untaps. They draw a Splinter Fright. Swarm will play the Selesnya Sanctuary. This is a land. It enters the battlefield tap. When it enters the battlefield, you return a land you control to its owner's hand. You can tap it for green and white. This will bounce the swamp back into their hand. And then they will pass the turn. At the end of Swarm's turn, Maelstrom will tap the forest and the mountain and cast Evolution Charm. This is an instant. It says choose 1, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library, or return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or target creature gains flying until the end of turn. We will choose to use the ability that lets us search for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into our hand, then shuffle our library. We'll be looking for a island. Here it is. We'll put it into our hand. We'll shuffle. Then Swarm's turn will end. Maelstrom will untap. They draw an Is It Boilerworks. We will play an island, and then we'll tap everything out, and we will cast Primal Empathy. This is an enchantment. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card if you control a creature with the greatest power among creatures on the battlefield. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on creatures you control. And then Maelstrom will pass the turn. Regiment untaps. They draw a Flawless Maneuver. Then they will tap 3 mana and cast Bonder's Ornament. This is an artifact. It taps for 1 mana of any color, and for 4 and tap, each player who controls a permanent named Bonder's Ornament draws a card. And then Regiment will pass the turn. Evolution untaps. They draw a Myriad Landscape. They will play the Myriad Landscape. It is a land. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap for colorless, and you can pay 2, tap, sacrifice it to search your library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. And then we will go to combat, and we will attack the Swarm with the Fertilid for 2. Swarm has no defense. It'll take 2 and go down to 38. Then Evolution will hold up mana to use the Fertilid's ability, and will pass the turn. Wisdom untaps. Draws a Psychosis Crawler. Wisdom will play the island. Then we don't really have anything else that we can do right now, and so Wisdom will pass the turn. Swarm untaps. Draws, gets a Blood Curdle. Swarm will play a Swamp. And then they will tap all their mana. And they will cast Audric, Lunarch, Marshal. This is a 3/3 legendary human soldier. At the beginning of each combat, creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn. If a creature you control has first strike, the same is true for flying, death touch, double strike, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, skulk, trample, and vigilance. And then Swarm will pass the turn. Maelstrom untaps. They draw a Clash of Titans. The Primal Empathy misses because there's no creature to put anything on. Unable to cast their very expensive hand, Maelstrom will play the Is It Boilerworks. It's a land. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, return a land you control to its owner's hand. Go ahead and return the green. And then Maelstrom will pass the turn. Regiment untaps. Draws a command tower. We'll play the command tower. It's a land, and you can tap it for 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. We'll spend 5 mana tapping the Bonder's Ornament for red and the rest for white, and we'll cast Adriana, Captain of the Guard. This is a 4/4 legendary human knight with melee, and other creatures you control have melee. And then Regiment will pass the turn. At the end of Regiment's turn, Evolution will spend 2 mana to activate their ability of their Fertilid, which will reduce it to just 1 counter, and we will be searching for a blue mana to put onto the battlefield tapped. There's an island, it enters the battlefield tapped, then we'll shuffle. Then we'll untap. We'll draw a Profane Command. We'll play a Swamp. And then I think we tap everything. And use the Mutate ability of Trumpeting Gnar. This is a 3/3 beast with Mutate 3 green, blue. And whenever this creature mutates, create a 3/3 green beast creature token. We're going to mutate this on top of the Fertilid, making it a 4/4 with the Fertilid's ability. And because we've mutated, we'll create a green beast creature token. There's our beast. And then we'll go ahead and go to combat, and we'll swing at the Arcane Maelstrom with the 4/4. Maelstrom has no response. We'll take 4 and go to 36. Then Evolution will pass the turn. Wisdom will draw. They get a Rogren Crystal. They can't cast anything good at 4 mana, so Timeless Wisdom will play the Reliquary Tower. This is a land. It says that you have no maximum hand size. You can tap it for colorless. And then we'll tap everything. Oh, we should have added a counter here for drawing a card. To cast the spell Pyre Phoenix. This is a 4/2 Phoenix with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may return a target instant or sorcery card with cycling ability from your graveyard to your hand. Our graveyard is empty. At the beginning of each end step, if you cycle 2 or more cards this turn, you can also return Spell Pyre Phoenix from your graveyard to your hand. This is not what's happening here, so we'll just leave this on the battlefield and we will pass the turn. Swarm untaps. Draws an Abzan Ascendancy. Swarm will tap out. Cast an Acidic Slime. This is a 2/2 ooze with Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. We will blow up the Boros Garrison. That belongs to Timeless Wisdom. Wisdom loses the garrison. Since we don't have any good attacks, we will pass the turn. Maelstrom untaps. Draws a mountain. We will play Forest. We'll spend 4 mana to cast the Murmuring Mystic. This is a 1/5 human wizard, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 blue bird illusion creature token with flying. The Primal Empathy fails again because we didn't have another creature. And then Maelstrom will pass the turn. Regiment untaps. Draws a mountain. We'll play the mountain. We'll tap 4 mana to cast Jirina Kudro, our commander. It's a 3/3 legendary human soldier. When it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white human creature soldier token for each time you cast a commander from the command zone this game. And other humans you control get +2/+0. We'll create a single white human soldier, since we've only cast Jirina once. And then Adriana, Captain of the Guard, is now a 6/4 human with melee. We'll also tap the Bonder's Ornament and Arcane Signet for white, and then we'll cast Thalia's Lieutenant. This is a 1/1 human soldier. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other human you control. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Thalia's Lieutenant. Put counters on each of these creatures. And then our 7/5 Adriana will go to combat and will attack Timeless Wisdom. And we attacked 1, so it becomes an 8/6. Wisdom has no defense, will take 8 and go to 32. And then Regiment will pass the turn. Evolution untaps. They draw a Temple of the False God. We'll play this, it's a land. It taps for 2 colorless to activate this ability only if you control 5 or more lands. We happen to control 6 lands, so we can definitely use this ability. But we are going to just tap out, and we'll leave 1 Jungle Hollow untapped and cast the Mutate ability of Souvenir Snatcher. It's a 4/4 bird with flying, and whenever this creature mutates, gain control of target non-creature artifact. We're going to be putting it on top of the Trumpeting Gnar to make it a 5/5 flying that mutates, gain control of target non-creature artifact, as well as creating a 3/3 beast. We'll create a beast right here. We will take control of the Arcane Signet belonging to Symbiotic Swarm. Symbiotic Swarm loses their Arcane Signet. We'll gain control of the Arcane Signet. We'll put it here. And then we will go to combat, and we will attack the Swarm with the 5/5 flyer. We'll hold back the 2/2/3s. Swarm takes 5 and goes down to 33. And then Evolution will pass the turn. Wisdom untaps, draws the Plains, put another counter on the Ominous Seas. We will play the Plains. We will tap the Reliquary Tower, the Island, and the Plains to cast Psychic Impetus targeting Adriana. This is an aura enchants creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and is goaded. And whenever enchanted creature attacks, you scry 2. Adriana has the Psychic Impetus affecting them. We will have to stay on defense because Regiment still has a bunch of creatures, and so Wisdom will pass the turn. Swarm untaps, draws a Canopy Vista. We'll play the Canopy Vista. It's a land, forest plains. You can tap it for green or white. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. We do not have 2 or more basic lands, so it'll enter the battlefield tapped. We're going to tap these 3 for green, white, and black and cast the Abzan Ascendancy. It's an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So we'll get 2 tokens here. We don't really have any good attacks just yet, and so Swarm will pass the turn. Maelstrom untaps. The Primal Empathy finally triggers, putting a counter on the Murmuring Mystic, making it a 2/6. We draw a Cruel Turf. We'll spend 4 mana and cast Niblis of Frost. This is a 3/3 spirit with flying and prowess. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, tap target creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. And then we will play the Gruul Turf. This is a land. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, return a land you control to its owner's hand. We'll go ahead and bounce the island back to our hand. We don't have much else we can do, so Maelstrom will pass the turn. Regiment untaps. They draw a Bajuka Bog. We will play Audrak Master Tactician. This is a 3/4 legendary human soldier with first strike. Whenever it and at least 3 other creatures attack, you choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. Because it enters the battlefield, Thalia will get a +1/+1 counter. And then we'll go to combat. Adriana is forced to attack and cannot attack Timeless Wisdom, so it's going to attack the Symbiotic Swarm. We're also going to be attacking with a human soldier into the Symbiotic Swarm. Jirina Kudro will attack Timeless Wisdom, and Thalia's Lieutenant will attack Symbiotic Swarm. This will trigger a whole bunch of melees because we're attacking 2 opponents. Each one will get +2/+2, making Adriana a 9/6. The human soldier will be a 6/4. Jirina will be a 8/6, and the Thalia's Lieutenant will be a 6/4. The attack trigger will go off, and Wisdom will scry 2. We will put both the Herald of the Forgotten and Hoofprints of the Stag on the bottom of the library. We're not going to block Jirina, and we'll take 6 to go to 26. Both of our creatures have Death Touch. We will block the big one with the acidic slime. We don't want to take 12, so we'll also cash in the Odric against the Thalia's Lieutenant, and we'll trade everything. Both of these will die. And we'll get 2 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying. We'll take 6 damage from the human that got through to go down to 27. In response to all blocks, we will cast the Flawless Maneuver. It's an instant. If you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. We do control our commander with Jirina here, and creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So we lose nothing. And then Ruth's Regiment will play the Bajuka Bog. This is a land. It enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. We will target the Swarm. The Swarm loses its 2 cards. They are exiled. And then Ruthless Regiment will pass the turn. Enhanced Evolution untaps. We'll draw a Muldrifter. We'll go to combat and we'll attack the Arcane Maelstrom with the mutated Souvenir Snatcher. Maelstrom will decline blocks and will take 5 to go to 31. Then we'll tap out and cast Nissa, Steward of Elements for 5, giving Nissa 5 counters. We will plus Nissa up to 7 to look at the top 2 cards and scry. We will put the Chittering Harvester on top, and we will put the Forest on the bottom. And then Enhanced Evolution will pass the turn. Wisdom untaps. Draws for an Azorius Chancery. We will put a counter on the Ominous Seas. We'll play the Ash Barrens. We'll tap out to play the Psychosis Crawler. This is a star artifact horde, and his power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in your hand. That's 3 right now. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. And then we will hold steady because we could theoretically die from Ruthless Regiment, and we will pass the turn. Swarm untaps. Draws an Angel of Finality. I think we don't have too much of a choice here. We are going to tap for 4. And we will cast Blood Curdle, targeting the Adriana. It's an instant, says destroy target creature, put a menace counter on a creature you control. Go ahead and stick a menace counter on one of our creatures. Adriana dies. Psychic Impetus returns to Wisdom's Graveyard. We're still going to need some more help to survive, but this is where we're at. And then Swarm will pass the turn. We'll untap. We draw Haldan, Avid Arcanist. Play the island. The upkeep will trigger. We'll put a counter on the Niblis of Frost, making it a 4/4. We'll spend 6 mana and cast Wart the Raid Mother. This is a 3/3 Legendary Goblin Shaman, and when it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 red and green Goblin Warrior creature tokens. Each red and green instant or sorcery spell you cast has Conspire. We'll create the warriors. We will go to combat, and we will attack Evolution's Nissa with the Niblis of Frost for 4. Evolution cannot block. Nissa will take 4 and go down to 3. And then Maelstrom will pass the turn. Regiment untaps. Draws a Swamp. Play the Swamp. We'll spend 6 mana and cast Titan of Eternal Fire. This is a 5/6 giant. Each human creature you control has red tap. This creature deals 1 damage to any target. We'll go to combat, and we will attack everybody into Timeless Wisdom. And we will choose so that the Psychosis Crawler blocks Jirina Kudro, and the Phoenix will block the Human Soldier. The Soldier and the Phoenix will trade, and Jirina Kudro will eat the Psychosis Crawler. Timeless Wisdom loses its board. And then Regiment will pass the turn. Evolution untaps. We draw a Chittering Harvester. We will +2 Nissa, taking her up to 5 to scry 2. We will keep the Auspicious Starix on top, but we'll put the Exotic Orchard on the bottom. We'll tap the Temple of the False Guard for 2, the Swamp, the Myriad Landscape, and the Forest to mutate the Chittering Harvester onto the Souvenir Snatcher. We'll go ahead and put this one on top, making it a 5/7. And whenever this creature mutates, we're going to do a bunch of stuff. We're going to create a green beast. We are going to gain control of a non-creature artifact. We'll take Regiment's Bonder's Ornament. Regiment loses the Bonder's Ornament. Evolution gets the Bonder's Ornament. And then each opponent sacrifices a creature. Swarm sacrifices a spirit. Maelstrom sacrifices a Goblin Warrior. We don't want to hit Swarm because that'll give Regiment a possible win here. So we are going to hit Arcane Maelstrom with the 5/7 Shivering Harvester. And we'll also attack with 2 of the beasts. We're definitely taking 5 in the air. We will block 1 of the beasts with a Goblin Warrior and a Murmuring Mystic. And we'll let the other one through. Evolution will kill the warrior and we'll kill one of the beasts, but we'll still take 5 and go down to 26. The warrior dies. 1 of the beasts die. And then we will evoke the Muldrifter. This is a 2/2 elemental with flying. When it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. We'll draw a Dimir Aqueduct and an Auspicious Derricks. The Muldrifter will self-sacrifice and will die. Then we will play the Dimir Aqueduct. It's a land, it enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, return a land you control to its owner's hand. You can tap it for blue and black. We'll go ahead and return a swamp to our hand. And then Enhanced Evolution will pass the turn. Wisdom untaps. Draws a Decree of Justice. We'll put a counter on the Ominous Seas. We'll tap 3 mana and cast the Rogren Crystal. This is an artifact. You can tap it for blue, red, or white. You can cycle it for 2. And then we'll play the Azorius Chancery. This is a land. It enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, return a land you control to its owner's hand. We'll bounce the island back into our hand. And then we will pass the turn. Swarm untaps. Draws a swamp. We'll play the swamp. We will tap these 2 and a swamp to cast the Harmonize. It's a sorcery. It says draw 3 cards. We'll draw 3. We get a Ever After. It's a Talpa Primal Dawn and Aerial Responder. So we are kind of stuck here. Just going to pass the turn and hope we don't die. Maelstrom will untap. We'll draw a Harrow. Play a Mountain. And oh, we forgot to use the Primal Empathy. We'll put a counter up onto the Nimbus of Frost, making it a 5/5. We will swing at Nissa with the Nimbus of Frost for 5. Nissa takes 5 and goes down. And then we will pass the turn. Regiment untaps. Draws a Citywide Bust. We'll spend 4 mana and cast Vigilante Justice. This is enchantment. Whenever a human enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to any target. We will go to combat and we will swing everything. We will make it so that the spirit will block Thalia's lieutenant. We will send the Titan and Jirina at Swarm, while Odric will hit Wisdom. Wisdom takes 3 and goes to 23. Swarm loses the spirit and then takes 9 to go to 18. Then Regiment will pass the turn. Evolution untaps. Draws a Masked Admirers. We'll play the swamp. We'll tap 6 mana to mutate the Auspicious Derricks onto the stack of creatures here. While that is on the stack, Maelstrom will tap 5 mana and cast Whiplash Trap. It's an instant trap. If an opponent had 2 or more creatures enter the battlefield under their control this turn, you may pay blue rather than pay the spell's mana cost. That doesn't matter. Return 2 target creatures to their owner's hand. We'll target the stack and we'll target one of the beasts. We'll create a bird illusion token off the Murmuring Mystic. In response, we will tap a island and the Bonder's Ornament and use the Fertilin's ability to remove this counter. We'll grab ourselves a forest and put it onto the battlefield tapped. We'll shuffle. Then we'll pick up all of these cards. The Derrick still falls onto the battlefield as a 6/6 elk beast. It has mutate 5 in green, and whenever this creature mutates, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile X permanent cards, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. Put those permanent cards onto the battlefield. All of these will end up back on our hand, and then with only 3 mana available to ourselves, we'll tap the Jungle Hollow and the Myriad Landscape to cast the Fertilid again. We'll put 2 counters on it, and then Enhanced Evolution will pass the turn. Wisdom untaps, draws gets a mountain. We'll get another counter on the ominous seas. We'll play the island. We'll spend 5 and cast Gavi Nest Warden. This is a 2/5 legendary human shaman. You may pay 0 rather than pay the cycling cost of the first card you cycle each turn. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 red and white dinosaur cat creature token. And then we'll cycle the Decree of Justice for free. It says it's a sorcery. Create X 4 white angel creature tokens with flying. Cycling 2 white. And then when you cycle Decree of Justice, you may pay X. If you do, create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. So because we can't afford a lot for the top part, we're going to pay X in 3. Because that's what we have. We'll cycle this. We'll draw another card, which is a Shivan Reef. And then we'll create 3 human soldiers. We'll use counters to mark the number of soldiers that we have. And then we'll create a 2/2 red and white dinosaur cat creature token. So there's our dinosaur cat. So now we have a board. And because we drew a card, we'll get a counter on the ominous seas. And then Wisdom will pass the turn. Swarm untaps. Draws an Archon of Valor's Reach. We'll spend 6 mana and cast an Archon of Valor's Reach. This is a 5/6 Archon with Flying, Vigilance, Trample. As it enters the battlefield, choose Artifact, Enchantment, Instant, Sorcery, or Planeswalker. Players can't cast spells of the chosen type. We're going to choose Instant to prevent our opponents from surprising us here. And because we don't have any instants, and so we will then hold that up. So we will then pass the turn. Maelstrom untaps. Draws a Psychic Impetus. Gets a counter on the Niblus of Frost. We'll spend 3 mana and cast Psychic Impetus on the Sterix. The Psychic Impetus will trigger the Niblus of Frost, making it a 7/7, and then we'll cast Haldan, Avid Arcanist. This is a 1/4 legendary human wizard. Partner with Paco, Arcane Retriever. We'll go ahead and grab Paco from the deck, and then you may play non-creature cards from exile with fetch counters on them if you exile them, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. So we'll go ahead and grab Paco, put this into our hand, shuffle. We'll go to combat and we'll swing at Evolution with the 7/7 Niblus of Frost. Evolution takes 7, it goes to 33. We need to tap 3 mana to cast Haldan. And then Maelstrom will pass the turn. Ruthless Regiment untaps. Draws a Temple of the False God. We'll play the Temple. We'll go to combat. We'll swing everything at Timeless Wisdom. And Audric will trigger. We'll have Gavi block the Titan. The 2/2 block Audric, and the other 2 1/1s block Thalia's Lieutenant. And Jirina Kudro to wipe out the entire board. Timeless Wisdom loses everything. Then Regiment will pass the turn. Evolution untaps. Draws a Pouncing Shore Shark. We're going to spend 5 mana to mutate the Chittering Harvester onto the Auspicious Sterix. We'll put the Sterix on top, but we will mutate, and each opponent will sacrifice a creature, and we will exile 1 permanent from the top of our library, and then we'll put that onto the battlefield. We'll exile from the top of our library till we hit a permanent. Here's our 1, the Darkwater Catacombs. This is a land. For 1, you can tap it and add blue and black. Put that on the battlefield. And then each opponent will sacrifice a creature. Swarm sacrifices the Archon. Maelstrom sacrifices a Bird Illusion. We'll spend 4 mana, tapping the Mirrored Landscape to tap the Catacomb, and then the Demir Aqueduct to mutate the Pouncing Shore Shark onto the Auspicious Sterix / Chittering Harvester combo. We'll put this under. It's a 4/3 Shark Beast with mutate 3 blue and flash, and whenever this creature mutates, you may return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. We're going to exile up to 2 permanents and then put them on the battlefield. So Rogue's Passage and a Forest. The Gaze of Granite remains exiled, and we'll put these 2 on the battlefield. Each opponent will sacrifice a creature, and the Shore Shark will bounce a creature. The Shore Shark will bounce the Niblus of Frost, and the Maelstrom will sacrifice Haldan, Avid Arcanist. We'll spend 5 more mana To mutate the Trumpeting Gnar onto this stack, we'll put it under everything. Now we're going to get 3 permanents. We get the Thornwood Falls, the Mind Screen will stay exiled, the Mortuary Mire will be put onto the battlefield, as well as the Tidal Barracuda. The Thornwood Falls is a land, it enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you gain a life, and you can tap it for green or blue. Go ahead and get a life to go up to 34. The Mortuary Mire is a land that enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you may put a target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. It taps for black. We can put the Muldrifter on top of the library, sure. And then the Tidal Barracuda is a 3/4 fish. Any player may cast spells as though they had flash. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. We'll also trigger the bounce ability and the sacrifice ability, and we'll get a 3/3 beast. We'll bounce the Murmuring Mystic, and then we'll trigger the sacrifice after that. The Murmuring Mystic returns to Maelstrom's hand, and then we are forced to sacrifice Wart, the Raid Mother. Evolution will go to combat, swinging at Swarm with the Sterex, which is an 8/8. This will trigger the Psychic Impetus to give Maelstrom a Scry 2. We will also swing 2 beasts at Maelstrom, and we'll swing the Fertilid at Maelstrom. Maelstrom Scries 2. We'll put the Predatory Impetus on the bottom, and we'll leave the Comet Storm on top. We're going to be taking 6 damage from the 2 beasts to go down to 20. Swarm takes 8 damage from the Sterex to go down to 10. Then Evolution will pass the turn. Wisdom untaps. Draws, gets a Boros Signet. We will take this up to 8. We may now remove 8 counters from the Seas to get a Kraken. At instant speed, we'll spend 6 mana to cast New Perspectives. It's an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. As long as you have 7 or more cards in hand, you may pay 0 rather than pay cycling costs. So we'll draw 3. We draw a mountain, a Curative Mysteries, and another mountain. We will play the Shivan Reef. This is a land. You can tap it for colorless or tap it for red or blue. It deals 1 damage to us. We'll tap it for colorless, and then we'll tap a Plains to cast the Boros Signet. This is an artifact. You can pay 1 and tap it for red or white. And from the 3 cards that we drew, we should add 3 counters to the Omnises to take us up to 11. And then Wisdom will pass the turn. Absent should have a Spirit from the death of the Archon, and we should have blocked with that Spirit. And so we'll just say that we blocked it, and we're still at 18. We'll untap. We'll draw. We get a Mimic Vat. We'll spend 3 mana cast an Aerial Responder. This is a 2/3 soldier with flying, vigilance, and lifelink. We'll spend 3 more mana to cast a Mimic Vat. This is an artifact. Whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile that card. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vat to its owner's graveyard. You can pay 3, tap it to create a token that's a copy of a card exiled with Mimic Vat. It gains haste exiled at the beginning of the next end step. And then Swarm will pass the turn. Maelstrom untaps. Draws a Comet Storm. The Primal Empathy fails. We will cast for 4 mana the Murmuring Mystic. For 3 more mana, we'll cast Harrow. This is an instant. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield, and then the shelf of your library. We'll create a bird illusion off the Murmuring Mystic, and then we'll sacrifice a mountain. We'll go grab a forest and an island. We'll shuffle. And then Maelstrom will pass the turn. Regiment untaps. Draws a Martial Impetus. We'll swing with everybody. Jirina will target Swarm and force the Lifelinker to block it, while the other 3 will just crash into Timeless Wisdom. Timeless Wisdom knows that it can't change the blocking math here, so it will just take 10 and go to 13. Swarm loses the Aerial Responder and will gain 2 life to go up to 20. Regiment will hold steady and will pass the turn. Evolution untaps. Draws a Muldrifter. We'll spend 6 mana to mutate the Souvenir Snatcher onto this giant stack here. We've mutated 4 times, so we're going to look for 4 permanents through exiling. We have a Migratory Greathorn. This is a 3/4 beast with mutate 2 green. Whenever this creature mutates, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tap, and then shuffle your library. Ukima Stalking Shadow. This is a 2/2 legendary whale wolf with partner with Khazor, Ruthless Stalker. When this creature enters the battlefield, so we'll go get Khazor. And it can't be blocked. When it leaves the battlefield, it deals X damage to target player, and you gain X life, where X is its power. We'll go grab Khazor. This will go into our hand. We'll shuffle. We have Cold-Eyed Selkie. This is a 1/1 Merfolk Rogue with Island Walk. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw that many cards. And then we have a Lifecrafters Bestiary. It's an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may pay green. If you do, draw a card. And then we'll trigger the Bounce ability. We will bounce the bird, and then we'll trigger the sacrifice ability. We'll also create a beast. Bird is bounced, the mystic dies, and then we'll gain control of a non-creature artifact. We'll choose our neighbor's Rogrin Crystal. We'll spend 4 mana to cast Khazor, Ruthless Stalker. This is a 3/3 legendary human warrior, partner with Ukima Stalking Shadow. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. I think that's it before combat. We'll go to combat. The Sterix stack will attack the Swarm because we are forced to because it's goaded. We'll stand 3 beasts. The Tidal Barracuda at Arcane Maelstrom. Maelstrom scries 2. We'll take the Mountain and stick it on the bottom, and the Hunter's Insight, and we'll also stick that on the bottom. We'll take 12 damage and go to 8. When the responder died, we should have had a Spirit, but the Spirit would have been sacrificed and or bounced, so it's gone. So we'll take 8 damage and go down to 12 with the Swarm. For 5 mana, we'll cast the Mull Drifter. It enters the battlefield, we'll draw 2 cards, and we'll also pay 1 more green to draw another card, so we'll draw 3. We draw a Forest, a Dreamtail Heron, and a Predator Ooze. Don't think we played a basic land this turn, or any land this turn, so we'll play the Forest. Enhanced Evolution will pass the turn. Wisdom untaps. Draws a Mountain. We'll play a Mountain. We'll spend 4 mana and cast Curator of Mysteries. It's a 4/4 Sphinx with flying, and whenever you cycle or discard another card, scry 1. You can cycle it for blue. We'll also grab the Ominous Seas. We'll go up to 12, but -8 will take us down to 4. And we'll get a Kraken. We'll have got the Kraken before the end of the Evolution's turn, so we'll have an 8/8. And since we can't really defend ourselves against Regiment, and we're not really concerned about Maelstrom, we'll attack Regiment with the Kraken for 8. Regiment has no blocks, we'll take 8 and go to 32. And Wisdom will pass the turn. We'll have exiled the Aerial Responder, and then we'll untap. We'll draw, we'll get a Nesting Grounds. We'll play the Nesting Grounds. It's a land. It has tap for colorless and 1 tap it, move a counter from target permanent you control to another target permanent you control. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. We'll spend 5 mana to cast the Chiron Wanderer. This is a 4/4 shapeshifter changeling. As long as a creature card with flying is in a graveyard, Chiron Wanderer has flying. The same is true for Fear, First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Haste, Land Walk, Lifelink, Protection, Reach, Trample, Shroud, and Vigilance. This gives it flying, trample, and vigilance from the Archon of Valor's Reach. And then Swarm will pass the turn. Maelstrom untaps. Draws an island. We'll play the island. We lose the ability of the Primal Empathy. We'll spend 4 mana. Blue, red, green, and another blue to cast our commander. This is Kalamax the Stormsire. This is a 4/4 legendary elemental dinosaur. Whenever you cast your first instant spell each turn, if Kalamax the Stormsire is tapped, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Whenever you copy an instant spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Kalamax. And then we will hold up our mana and we will pass the turn. Regiment on taps. We draw Rakdos Signet. We'll go to combat and we'll swing with everybody. The Titan of Eternal Fire, Audric and Thalia's Lieutenant into Timeless Wisdom with no blocks to finish off Timeless Wisdom. We'll attack Jirina into Symbiotic Swarm, also with no blocks, to deal 4 damage. Timeless Wisdom has no blocks. Timeless Wisdom will take a total of 14 damage and perish, and will vanish from the game. This removes Roggen Crystal from Evolution. Swarm takes 4 and goes to 8. Then Regiment will spend 2 mana and cast Rakdos Signet. It's an artifact, and for 1 you can tap it and add black and red, and then Regiment will pass the turn. Evolution untaps. We'll scry. We will take the Force and put it on the bottom. We'll draw the Propaganda. We'll spend 4 mana to mutate the Dreamtail Heron on the stack. It's a 3/4 elemental bird with flying. Whenever it mutates, draw a card. In response, Maelstrom will tap the Gruul Turf that is at Boilerworks on the island to cast Clash of Titans. This is an instant. It says target creature fights another target creature. We'll put a counter on Kalamax and we'll duplicate that instant. We'll have the Chiron Wanderer and the Titan of Eternal Fire fight the giant stack. All the other triggers are still in the stack, but this will kill the Chiron Wanderer and the stack, as well as the Titan of Eternal Fire. If the Chiron Wanderer dies, we'll get a Spirit, and we'll put the Spirit Chiron Wanderer into exile here, putting the aerial responder out. The Titan of Eternal Fire dies. Then Kalamax is sacrificed. The whole stack will die, but we're going to resolve everything as well. We're going to get 5 permanents. We exile the Crozen Grip. We get a Capricopian, which is a 0/0 Goat Hydra. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters, which is 0, it just dies. We get a Forest. Beast Within is exiled. Swamp. Manascape Refractor. It's an artifact, enters the battlefield tapped. It has all the activated abilities of all lands on the battlefield. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to pay activation costs for Manascape Refractor's ability. And we get another Forest. We'll get a 3/3 Beast. We'll bounce the Spirit. Spirit's gone. I think a bunch of these creatures should have 1/1s, but I don't think it's going to matter because the game's going to end soon. We'll draw a card, which is a Vorapede. And then we will steal the Arcane Signet over there. There's the Arcane Signet. Because we cast a creature spell, we'll pay a green to draw a card. From the Lifecaster's Bestiary, we get an Opulent Palace. We'll play the Opulent Palace. It's a land, enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap for green, blue, or black. And then this stack dies. All of this will go into the graveyard, and we will return the Psychic Impetus. Psychic Impetus goes to the graveyard. We'll go to combat, and we will attack Swarm with 3 beasts. And we will attack the Beast, the Migratory Greathorn, and the Masked Admirers. We'll put the Muldrifter on the Swarm. We'll put the Barracuda on the Maelstrom. We'll put Ukima on the Swarm. We'll put Selkie on Maelstrom. We'll put Khazar over here on Swarm. And we'll put the Fortilid on the Maelstrom. And that is a gigantic pile of damage that neither of the 2 opponents can do anything about, so they'll perish. Swarm dies. Maelstrom dies. And we have a joint victory with Regiment and Enhanced Evolution. And that was quite the battle. Enhanced Evolution really went off here. Let me know what your thoughts were about this Commander battle. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.